told the speaker I was here on time.
Let the record show the date and the time that the Democratic leader of the Senate was here before the rest of us. Thank you, Mr. Leader, for honoring us with your presence on time and for returning to the House side. I'm pleased to welcome you and Senator Stabenow back over to the House. We were always so proud of your service here, and we're proud of your leadership in the United States Senate. And we're also pleased to welcome Senator Booker to the House. Where'd he go? To the House. But they will agree, as will my colleagues from the House, Congressman Cartwright, Dingell, Lieu, and Neguse, that our true VIPs today are our special guests, Daniella Knight and Sarah Taylor, will tell us what this means to them and their families. I want to acknowledge the great leadership of Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who for the past 10 Congresses has introduced this legislation. And now we have this historic day when we can put forth Social Security for our children. This will make a tremendous difference in the lives of America's families, and so proud that so many children will be taken out of poverty. My whole thing in politics, my why, was the sadness over 1 in 5 children living in poverty in America. 1 in 5 children in America going to sleep hungry at night. How could it be? Well, this tax credit, I call it the Biden tax credit. Thank you, Mr. President. Does a lot to alleviate that. And it's part of so much more. Child tax credit, yes. Child care, family and medical leave, so many other initiatives that were in the rescue package or will be in our families section of what comes next. So again, on this happy occasion, where within this past week, we did what we promised. Help was on the way, help is here, money in the pocket, children now going back to school healthily, people back to work. Again, money in the pockets of the American people, vaccines in their arms. We're very proud of our president. We're very proud of the Democrats in Congress. We hope that we can go forward in a bipartisan way. I leave that up to our friends in the Senate to give us guidance on that. And with that, I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished Majority Leader of the Senate, Chuck Schumer, former member of the House.
For how many years? 18. 18 happy, wonderful, productive years. I remember the Speaker's first day in the House of Representatives, 1986. Special election, yes. I won't do it again. Say what George Miller said. No, you don't. Okay. Okay. So it is great to be here. I want to thank the Speaker for her amazing leadership on this issue. She has always been a beacon in helping children in so many different ways. I want to thank my co-chairs of my chair and co-chair of the DPCC who have joined us, the great Debbie Stabenow and Cory Booker. We have so much talent in this. Thank you. We have so much talent in the Senate, and so proud of both of them. And I want to thank my colleagues in the House, of course, Rosa DeLauro, who has been such a champion here, and Congress members Dingell and Cartwright and Neguse, who have been, and Lieu, who have been here as well. So, because of all the work of the people here and so many others, we are able to say to America's families, help is on the way. They need it. So many children in America are in poverty. When a child is in poverty, they may not get, through no fault of their own, they may not get fed properly, clothed properly, educated properly, the best of health care, best of some kind of housing. And when they're younger, when they become young adults, even at 14, 15, 16, they're in a deep ditch. Now, many of them on their own, to their credit, climb out of that ditch, but many can't. And this bill will prevent so many people from falling into that ditch. And believe me, we're so proud it is in the, it was in the ARP, but it's going to live long after the ARP. We know that in our reconciliation bill. So it's last week the checks began to arrive, and it not only helps the poor, It helps a lot of middle-income families. About 80 to 90% of all families will get this help. COVID was tough on middle-class families too. Child care, loss of job, cutback in hours, cutback in pay, more health care costs, more transportation costs, you name it. And this helps them as well. So what we Democrats have done is help the poor, help those in the working class struggling to get to the middle class, and help those in the middle class stay in the middle class despite the ravages of COVID. We're here to help people. We don't sit around and say, oh, we might have to raise taxes on wealthy people like our Republican friends do. No, our job is to help people, help American families. And there's no greater thing that has done that than this CTC, which began this week. 4 million children out of poverty. That alone would be a monumental accomplishment for any Congress. And that's just one of many things that we are doing. So, we're taking taxpayer dollars, giving it right back to Americans' parents. I've heard so many stories. I've stood with so many families like these wonderful folks here in New York. And I know how much this will mean. People cry when they hear this is going to happen. When ministers announce it at their churches, people get up and cheer. I've been there. It's amazing. And I'm so proud of us for doing this. More help will be on the way. We believe in you, America's families. We know it's not easy to get to the middle class if you're struggling to get there, to stay in the middle class if you're there. But for the first time in a while, this federal government is saying, we are going to help you. We're not concerned spending all our time and effort on the wealthy few or the big corporations. We're helping average American families, and we're proud of that. With that, I'm going to have to apologize. I have to leave, but I want to turn it over to Congressman Lieu, who will introduce Daniella Knight.
Thank you, Leader Schumer, and I want to thank Speaker Pelosi for their hard work in getting the child tax credit into law. I'm going to be introducing Daniella. Before I do that, I just want to remind people, how did we get here? We got here because every Democrat voted for this child tax credit, and every Republican voted no. And what does this child credit do? It allows hardworking parents like Daniella the money to provide child care, the money to put gas in their car, to go to work, and to pay for other expenses. I also want to note that this is a stark contrast of what happens when Democrats are in power. We cut taxes for the middle class. When Republicans were in power just a few years ago, they cut taxes for billionaires and for large corporations. And the amazing thing about this child tax credit is it didn't just happen a few days ago. In the middle of August, it happens again. These payments go out. In the middle of September, another round of payments go out. In the middle of October, the middle of November, the middle of December. This is a huge lift for millions of working class families. Families like Daniella, she has children ages 4, 6, and 10. I've got 2 teenage sons, so I know that at those ages, they still like their parents. Daniella had to work with her husband on opposing shifts because childcare was too expensive, and they had other expenses to pay. So this child tax credit refund has been a lifesaver to her. Daniella lives in Maryland. She has the courage today to come and speak to all of you, so I'm going to introduce our wonderful Daniella Knight.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today. I am Daniella Knight, a proud mom of 3 terrific kids, ages 4, 6, and 10. We live in Annapolis. I'm also a very active member of Moms Rising and a beneficiary of the expanded child tax credit. In fact, it is the reason that I'm here today. Because of the expanded child tax credit, our kids are able to enjoy summer camp this week. And in the fall, it will make it possible for our youngest to attend preschool and get ready for kindergarten. It has been a grueling year. Even before the pandemic, we struggled to care for our kids and work without the kind of care infrastructure that our country needs. When each of my children was born, we were under a lot of strain without a reasonable amount of paid leave. Each time, I had just a week or 2 of paid leave to recover from childbirth and get my newborn off to a good start. I am still not sure how we survived the newborn periods, which are so physically demanding for moms, often coping with sleep deprivation and having extreme financial pressure on top of it. Before the pandemic, I worked 2 part-time jobs. I managed operations for a small property management company, and I worked as a realtor. My husband worked at a legal technology firm. We were what I call tag team parents. We worked opposite shifts because full-time childcare was well beyond what we could afford. It would have cost more than my entire salary. Shortly before COVID-19, I took on a 3rd job as a pediatric sleep consultant. And that meant that my husband and I were both working remotely after the kids went to sleep. It was exhausting. Then came COVID-19. Schools closed, and suddenly our home became our school, our preschool, and our office. My husband and I were trying to work and homeschool our 3 children at the same time. I didn't qualify for paid leave under the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act because my employer was too small. Then, 3 months into the pandemic, my husband was laid off permanently. That was terrifying. We lost a large portion of our income and our health care. I frantically took on extra sleep consulting hours as my husband searched for a new job and applied for unemployment, which turned out to be a lengthy process. He was approved for unemployment assistance, but it took over 6 months to receive benefits. Thankfully, he started a new job as a government contractor in September, but before that, we were forced to spend down our savings to cover bills and necessities. With 2 of my kids learning virtually and my husband now working daytime hours, I made the tough decision to resign from my property management job. It simply wasn't sustainable to continue working 3 jobs with the kids at home, and my health was suffering. I continue to work remotely as a pediatric sleep expert, usually working well after midnight every night. But thanks to the flexibility of my job, the sheer number of hours I put in, and thanks to much needed stimulus payments, we were finally able to buy a home. However, we continue to be under financial strain. Having no access to paid parental leave put us in a financial hole. Having no access to affordable childcare made it impossible to dig out of it. The expanded child tax credit is helping to change this. In addition to helping with the basics and some structured summer activities, the child tax credit is also helping cover healthcare costs, which can often be unexpected with kids. After a year of what seemed like chronic nasal congestion, a visit to the ENT uncovered that our 4-year-old had a foreign object up his nasal cavity. I immediately thought that it was a Lego piece, but much to my surprise, it turned out to be a feather. We only know this now because we were able to cover the $500 copay for the surgery to remove it just last week. Our 6-year-old had a dental procedure the same week, and I was shocked to find out that the anesthesia was not covered by insurance. Our copay for the procedure for 1 tooth was $200. We are able to pay this now because of the expanded child tax credit. I'm very grateful that Congress expanded the child tax credit. It is making a difference right now for my family. I really hope Congress will make it permanent. It's what hardworking families like mine urgently need. Thank you.
Good job. Well, thank you, Daniella, and thank you to our speaker and Leader Schumer and all of my colleagues who are here. This is actually 6 months to the day and since President Biden was inaugurated. And every day, I keep saying things are getting better with Biden. Every day, things are getting better. And one of the things that is very clear is that we are reflecting what I've heard the president say many times, which is, don't tell me what my values are. Show me your checkbook. So the federal checkbook now, under the leadership of President Biden and Democrats in the House and Senate, looks very different because we are putting our values into practice. We are saying the tax code should actually work for working families. That's what the child tax credit is all about. We're saying to families, we see you, we hear you, we understand what Daniella is talking about and what Sarah will be talking about, the things that keep families up at night, every night. The majority of Americans, not the folks that got the 2017 tax cut, $2 trillion that went to only the wealthiest and the most well-connected in the country, but the majority of Americans. So I'm proud to be here with my colleagues, lifting up and supporting the families of our country and creating tax policy that will lift more than half the children in our country out of poverty. What a great thing. Our next speaker knows how this money will help her family and her students. Sarah Taylor from Stafford, Virginia, is a single mom of one grown child and 2 teenagers. She's a teacher who works with English language learners, and she always is taking on extra responsibilities at work so she can make ends meet. Welcome, Sarah Taylor.
Good morning. Thank you for the chance to be here today. My name is Sarah Taylor, and I'm a single mom of 3 wonderful children, ages 26, 16, and 15. My 2 youngest and I live in Stafford, Virginia. I'm also a high school English teacher gearing up to start my 20th year of teaching English language learners, and I'm a proud member of Moms Rising. I want to thank every one of you who supported the expanded child tax credit. Being a single mom and a teacher are roles that often complement each other beautifully, but sometimes they collide, especially when it's time to pay the bills or when I'm confronted with an unexpected crisis. Teaching is incredibly rewarding, but it also means living on the edge financially. So I've always taken on all the extra work I can get, both during the school year and over the summer, to earn a little bit of extra pay, which has only ever kept my head just above water. Then came the pandemic. It's been a tough year for my family, my community, my students, and their families. While virtual learning was challenging for all students, it presented unique hurdles for students still learning English. So some of my students came into the school building despite the pandemic, while some of them stayed home. That meant I was teaching in person in the classroom from the beginning of the school year, as well as learning how to teach online, as well as adapting my materials and lessons to the concurrent teaching model. I put in long, long hours, as most teachers did. It's really no wonder we lost so many teachers last year. It was hard for the students too. Their families were struggling. Unfortunately, some of my students dropped out so they could work full-time or to supervise younger siblings while their parents worked. Some of my students were dialing into virtual classes from their jobs, even hiding earbuds under their hair, hoping their managers wouldn't notice. Many of the students who stayed in school had to contend with external pressure from family or managers to quit school, and from internal pressure over the guilt from staying in school when their families were experiencing such financial and logistical strain. I felt some of that guilt too. At the same time as I was in the school building with my students, my children were at home all day, every day, isolated from their social networks, struggling to learn remotely. I wanted to be there with them, to keep them on track, but you can't be in 2 places at once. I am fortunate to have an incredible roommate who is more family than lodger, and she helped them a lot. But if my kids had been elementary school aged, I really don't know what I would have done. The stimulus checks did relieve some of the stress. We mostly used the funds for necessities, but we also used some to respond to the situation. For example, we bought better technology for my kids' online classes and my online teaching. We got supplies to transform spots in my house into learning spaces. I also enrolled my teens into online music classes because they needed an emotional outlet during a year when they were so terribly isolated. While the stimulus checks helped us get through the worst of the pandemic, those funds are gone. so the child tax credit is a greatly appreciated resource to help us get through the recovery. My family is used to making do without, but these funds will give us some breathing room. It will help us keep up on our bills, buy some extras, and continue healing. Moreover, it will offer some of my students and their families desperately needed relief, and hopefully more of them will be able to stay in school this year and focus on schoolwork. I know some people think only about the economy when they think about recovery, but families need to recover too. Just because there's a light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean our children have gotten over the social, academic, and emotional trauma of the last year. That will take time. These funds will make it possible for parents to help their kids bounce back, stabilize emotionally, rebuild their social groups, and get healthy. So thank you for making it possible for us to invest in our children. Thank you for the expanded child tax credit and for doing all you can to make it permanent.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Daniella, for putting the real face. They represent thousands and hundreds of thousands working families across this country, that this is what the tax credit is for. I want to thank our Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer for their leadership in getting us here, all of my colleagues. But it's really important that people understand what the child tax credit is and what historic relief it's bringing to people. In my district, 90% of the children are going to benefit. And they remind me of what I'm hearing at home. Last week I was with parents and one of the mothers said, when I get this check today, I can buy my child a bed. Right before the whole pandemic started, I was at an after-school program, and I went up to this little boy, and he looked on his face, and I said, I bet you can't wait to get home and just have dinner with your parents. And he said to me, we don't eat dinner. We can't afford it. I talked to another union worker last week who had to quit her job because both of her husband and she were working, and they didn't have the child care. And they couldn't afford it, and they couldn't figure out how to make it work. So over and over, and you've heard, I hear about people who are working 2 or 3 jobs, and they just need help. So you need to understand that this makes hard work pay off by putting money back in the pockets of working people who just need a little help. It's giving a child a bed to sleep in. It's helping, there are things that we think of necessities, like being able to buy shoes so a son can play in a baseball team or a soccer team. This helps that mother buy her child just to be able to have that pair of shoes so they can play. It's for child care. It's for gas in the car. So this is a tax cut that honors the dignity of work. And we need to be doing that and keep doing it. And now it's my honor to introduce my good friend and champion of working people, Senator Cory Booker.
Generations ago, our country dealt with the outrage of high levels of poverty amongst seniors by creating something called Social Security. It's an extraordinary change to our society and our culture. It took our ideas of honoring our elders into actual public policy. Today, generations later, we are talking about the same kind of policy that ends the moral obscenity of child poverty, but just like Social Security, which has helped so many working people retire with more security and dignity, this is helping middle class and working class families enjoy a nation that doesn't just speak to the love of their children, but to create policy that actually accomplishes that. This is a profound historic moment. I will say my grandfather told me he was a Democrat, not because of any kind of partisanship, but because it helped to make this nation what it is. We are the party of Medicare. We are the party of Social Security. We are the party of workers and worker rights and unions. We're the party of civil rights. I am so proud that we have now created a policy that helps shape this country and declare that the Democratic Party is the party of children and families in a policy that we have achieved. We need to make this permanent. But today, all across this country, millions and millions of families are seeing our nation take a step forward into becoming the beloved community that we must be as a nation. I'm really honored to introduce now my neighbor, as well as my friend, Congressman Cartwright.
Thank you, Senator Booker. And thank you all for joining us. I'm Matt Cartwright. I hail from northeastern Pennsylvania, a place where, like Debbie Dingell's district, 90% of the children qualify for this federal tax relief. It's 126,000 kids in my district alone in northeastern Pennsylvania. And you think about what that's used for. You know, Daniella mentioned it, Sarah mentioned it, childcare. You know, I have so many employers calling me up at the office and saying, we can't, and this was before the pandemic too, we can't fill these positions in restaurant and retail. We can't fill these positions for manufacturing because people aren't trained up for the job. We have workforce development problems. Well, what does this tax credit do? $500 or $600 for a couple of kids? It's going to pay for child care, as you heard here this morning. What does that do? It frees up moms and dads to go work in restaurant and retail, or if they want to train up for those manufacturing jobs, they have the time now to go take courses and enroll in junior colleges and trade schools. So this is welcome tax relief for where it should go, for the ordinary American people. I want to tell you about a lady named Alicia in my district. She's from Pittston. As a northeastern Pennsylvania native growing up in Pittston, she wrote, the one thing I loved about growing up here was learning the value of hard work. No matter what life has thrown at me, it was instilled in me that hard work does pay off. Although my personal working motherhood journey had many obstacles at times, nothing could have prepared me and many other parents for the balancing act of raising your children and working from home while your children are learning remotely. The American Rescue Plan ensured that relief reached working people and communities in Pennsylvania. I'm Matt Cartwright, and I am very, very proud to have voted with all the other Democrats for the American Rescue Plan. Now I want to turn it over to my terrific young colleague, Joe Neguse from Colorado.
Well, thank you to Matt. Very hard to follow all of my distinguished colleagues, but as Matt and everyone else has said, this historic tax credit really isn't about me. It's not about us. It's about heroes like Sarah and Daniella. And your stories, Daniella, your story resonated with me in particular as a father of a 3-year-old daughter. I'm very glad that feather got removed. You know, I just would like to share one more story of a hero in my district. I had a chance, like my colleagues, to visit with families back in Colorado last week, and I met one woman named Annie from Boulder. Annie is 8 months pregnant. She's about to go on maternity leave, but her employer only covers 6 weeks of paid leave, and her entire family relies on her insurance. This tax cut will allow her family to cover health insurance for them until she's able to get back to work. What a monumental difference this tax credit will make in the lives of countless Americans. I am so grateful to my colleagues for leading this effort, and of course to our fearless leader, someone who has fought harder for the children of our country than anyone else in the modern history of the United States of America. And she is responsible for, as what Senator Booker said, creating Social Security for our kids. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Speaker Pelosi to close us out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neguse. I thank you and our colleagues, Senator Booker, Senator Stabenow, as well as the distinguished Majority Leader. I also, though, want to point out that, again, our special guests are Sarah and Daniella to share their stories. And all of our guests who are with us, thank you for being with us. Mamás from Porto. Moms Rising in Spanish. Moms Rising, there's a woman named Kristen Rowe Fingbiner. She established Moms Rising. And I want to thank them for the role that they played, not only in helping us pass the Biden child tax credit, because we had to do it on our own. We unfortunately did not get one Republican vote on this. We do have Republican support across the country. But Moms Rising was not only helpful in passing, but it's very important for people to take advantage of this benefit, because if they don't, they're missing something very important in their lives, as our colleagues have pointed out the difference that it will make. So many organizations, nonprofits and the rest, Moms Rising is exceptional in terms of its size, but the confidence that it instills in its members and the outreach that it does make this possible. We did the inside maneuvering. We had the leadership of the President of the United States, but the outside mobilization of our groups and our friends made all of this possible, and now we want them to help us get people signed up. Today is part of a drumbeat across America. Under the leadership of our Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, represented by our 4 co-chairs here, we had not only Child Tax Credit Day of Action, we had Child Tax Credit Week of Action. And the President of the United States had his own led off with one of those days, he and Kamala Harris in the White House. So we're trying to get to people where they live, where they are, where they have needs, and this does that. And as I said earlier, it's all a part of a bigger program we have in the next legislative presentations. We'll have family and medical leave, child care, any other initiatives that enable us to build back better with women. Not that dads don't need child care, they do, and we want them to have it as well. Build back better with women. This is very liberating for the families, very necessary for the children, but also very invigorating for our country. So I thank all of our participants. Let us especially thank Moms Rising, Daniella, and Sarah for their participation.